if you're cool with that, maybe just, I know you mentioned like some of the conservation practices that are related to, resource concerns, and then those also do tie into some of your specific incentive programs.
Yeah, I'll just share my screen, and I actually brought up some websites that folks can go to. So let me share my screen. Sure. And can you see that?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So I'm just going to showcase Lynn County, but each county has their own website, NRCS website. And as you scroll down, you can see the long range plan that the DC has put together, the district conservationist for each county. You can scroll down to the current financial assistance opportunities. And these here are the specific ones for Lynn County. So we have the Western Oregon Wildfire Emergency Stabilization, the Water Quality Compliance, which is the hazelnut, or no, that's the hazelnut conservation is the irrigation efficiency. Forest resistance and resilience is the woodland restoration. And then we also have oak woodland and prairie restoration strategy. And so to find out if you are in those priority areas, we have this conservation map. And I brought up Lynn County is right here. Can you see my mouse?
Yep, we see it.
Okay. Okay. So this is Benton County and Lynn County. It's kind of all layered over each other, but if you scroll in, and yeah, you can see a little bit better. So if you're in the Lebanon area and you pull down the legend, you can see that this green area is the oak woodland area, and that is one of the strategies for the Lynn County. And then this overlaps. This is the forest help strategy in this area. So if you're located within this priority area, you can submit an application and we can move forward with planning financial assistance on your land. If you're not in that priority area, you can still submit an application and you'll just have to wait until the next fiscal year for funding, because we have to update the shapefile boundary. And we don't do it just for any reason. There has to be a good number of folks in that area that want to do forest health, if we want to expand it up to this area, for an example. And so, these were chosen for scientific reasons. This is the priority woodland acres, and this is the priority oak acres. And so you can kind of see the trend that it just kind of outlines all this Forest Service land, kind of goes around the cities. We don't like to include cities into our strategies because we're focusing more on the watershed. So just so you know about that map, and then to go back to the Lynn County website, if you click on this link right here, it's very little and it's you might skip over it, but this is the most important link I think of when I'm looking for program information. And so I clicked on that and I brought up this. So it has all of our programs throughout the state. So EQIP is our most famous program, Environmental Quality Incentive Program. That's where all of the strategies, local strategies are under, and then also EQIP initiatives, which is organic program, high tunnel program, and then sage grouse, which we don't have in this area. And then there's grant programs, small innovation grants for people that want to try new projects and new technologies. There's grants for that. There's grants for partnership programs, and then Joint Chiefs, which is NRCS and Forest Service. So basically, we can focus on a larger scale, landscape scale objective to treat private and Forest Service land. And then CSPs are another one, Conservation Stewardship Program. This program is more along the lines of enhancing those practices that you're already doing on the property. And so a lot of the time, this program comes after the EQIP program. And there's a 5-year, it's a 5-year contract with an annual payment. And it's just helping you keep that conservation going for the next 5 years. The other ones are the easement program. So the Wetland Reserve Easement Program is restoring those wetlands that had been converted to cropland, and then you want to take that out of cropland and put it into wetland easement and restore it back to its historic site. That goes along with, so we also have ag land easement, where it's to keep land into cropland or production, and so that urban development doesn't take over, so that it's not sold in many lots for subdivisions. So there's 2 types of easements we have here. And then we have the link for planning assistance. We have a plant materials center that has a lot of information about crops and seeds, native plants, invasives, information that grow, for plants that grow in your area. And then sometimes we have the emergency watershed protection program, that if there's an emergency drought, a fire or flood in your area, this program sources a lot of funds together and helps with that emergency process. Like we did this past fall with our fire program, and we worked with FEMA and a whole bunch of other organizations. And then, let's see. Oh, can't click there. There you go. And the EQIP program, let me see if it's gonna work. This will show you all the deadlines when applications are due. And you can click on any of these and find out details. This is the application right down here, the CPA 1200. And what else? I think that's all I had.
Great.
Perfect timing, Amy.
Okay.
Yeah, we've actually had a couple other partners trickle in. Thanks so much for reviewing those programs, Amy. And I'll be sure to get that web link to the participants so they can go through and check out what programs are available in their area and even beyond Lynn County. And then I'm just going to kind of go through our partners sort of in the order they show up as tiles. And so Jared Jabusik, you're up first. If you don't mind introducing yourself to the group real quick and just perhaps chatting about some of the incentive programs that may be available to folks in our area would be great.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Jared Jabusik. I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I must be late. I thought this started at 6:30, so apologies for being late. But thanks for letting me come. So I work at the National Wildlife Refuges. My office is at Finley, but I don't really go there anymore. But we have Finley National Wildlife Refuge, Ankeny, and Basket Slough as well. But I work in the Partners for Fish and Wildlife program, which is the program that lets us go off of the refuges and onto private lands to work with landowners who want to do voluntary habitat restoration. And so that allows us to mostly work. We generally don't work just by ourselves on projects. We're often working with other partners like watershed councils, soil and water conservation districts, the NRCS, and folks like that. We work really closely with NRCS on some of their wetlands projects. And we've got some resources. Usually it's assistance with equipment and our own people bringing equipment off of refuges. Sometimes it might just be technical assistance coming out to people's properties and looking around. Despite working for the feds, I am not a cop. I'm not looking to take anybody's land away or anything like that. From the government, I'm here to help, right? So yeah, we work a lot on prairies and oak habitats is primarily where we focus. We don't do a whole lot in major stream restoration projects. We have so many really partners who are really good at doing that kind of thing, but we help out sometimes. We can do, in addition to equipment, sometimes we are also doing prescribed burns and things like that. So yeah, just anything that's good for birds and rare plants and butterflies and stuff like that. I don't have a website to show you or anything too formal, but I can certainly get my contact information out if anybody wants to talk to me and learn more about what we do. Is that good? Is there more I should be sharing?
No, that's a great introduction, Jared. Thanks. We're just going to have kind of the partners go through and do that introduction sort of to themselves, some of those programs, and then we're going to open it up to our participants. If they have questions for folks, if you're willing to stick around, that'd be great.
You bet.
Awesome. Thanks. Up next in random order, I've got Jaron Robbins, who works for Oregon Department of Forestry. Jaron, if you want to just give an introduction to yourself and some of the programs that ODF has for folks, that would be great.
Yeah, you guys can hear me okay? Okay, good. So yeah, my name is Jaron Robbins. I'm with the Oregon Department of Forestry out of the Sweet Home office. I work in the private forest program. So we deal with everything logging administration, so the Forest Practices Act, fire rules, things of that nature, all on private forest land. So if people are wanting to do some harvest or anything that's a commercial operation, they file a notification to do that with the Department of Forestry. It's kind of a permit, if you will. We don't use the term permit. It's a free notification, and then we contact you and make sure all applicable rules and procedures are followed. We're also available to go on site visits with landowners, operators, if they just have general questions about, timberlands. Hey, is it time to thin, or who should I call, or some of that kind of stuff. So, we're available in Lynn County. I cover the southern portion of Lynn County, so south of Highway 20 and Highway 228. the northern portion of Lynn County is Steve Kendall. He couldn't be here tonight. And then there's a little bit of Lynn County that's actually covered out of the Lions office as well. And they are, I don't know who to tell you to call there right now. They're kind of in the middle of hiring someone for that position. So more to come on that one if you're in that little bit of area there, kind of Lions, Mill City portions of Lynn County. So we don't have a lot of programs going on currently. We assist with a lot of the other federal programs. The one thing that we do continuously pretty much have funding for these areas is stewardship plans or management plans for landowners' properties. And that's kind of an annual funding stream. So we take applications for folks to do a cost share on those. It's about a 75% cost share maximum to hire a contractor to get a land management plan done for your property. Similar to some of the stuff you guys have been discussing over the weeks, but a little bit more in depth maybe. Really depends on the landowner's goals and what they want out of the plan. They can be a really valuable resource for people who are, new to the area maybe, or are just kind of wanting to get an understanding of the timber, the markets, the rules, the people, kind of outline what comes next and what are good ideas to do over the next kind of 10-year scope for your property. Thinnings, clear cuts, spraying, noxious weed control, any gamut of things that are related to the forest management. So pretty good program. We don't have a ton of funding. It's an application cycle. Not everyone gets funded every year, but generally speaking, by the second year, you would be funded depending on where you're at. It's kind of a need or risk-based thing. We have to, kind of rate properties to see if it's high potential or medium potential or low potential for stewardship plans. So there's some criteria there, but if you're interested, you can contact us at the Sweet Home office and we'll get you squared away on that. That's really the only program we offer. We have a little bit of fuels reduction stuff out of the Sweet Home office. That's actually a county grant in Lynn County that is administered by the fire crew there, and they help get landowners in contact with the juvenile department of Lynn County, and they go do some brushing and chipping and treatment of stuff for defensible space for around homes and residences in most of Lynn County. I think they cover, and that's handled by Carl Limmer out of our office. And as you can imagine, they are pretty much booked up for the foreseeable future, but if that is a need, that would be get on the waiting list there, and that might be something that's applicable depending on where you're located. And those are really the only things we have going on in this corner of the world right now.
Great. Thanks, Jaron. We appreciate that very much. And yeah, we'll follow up with your contact information. And then maybe if you want to send me some of those partners, since we do have participants kind of from a wide swath of Western Oregon. So some of your associates might end up being their representative. So that would be great. Brian Bangs is back. He gave a great talk a couple of workshops ago. Brian, if you don't mind just kind of talking a little bit more about some of the work that you do and how folks can get a hold of you, that'd be great.
Great. I'm an aquatic ecologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in a different department basically than Jared is in, but both U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service employees. I focus primarily on freshwater ecosystems, and my main focus is non-game freshwater fishes and beaver in Oregon. And although I work and live in the west side of the state, I work all across the state. So, my way to contribute and kind of be involved would be to help with assessments, help link participants in this workshop up with other partners who could go out and do other types of assessments, be it with fish and fish trapping or other like kind of aspects of the riparian zone, and to help support projects as they move along. So I think you guys have my information from the last time I did this, but I'll make sure that Mike and Shannon have it to send out to everybody.
Excellent. Great. Thanks so much, Brian. Yeah, we'll definitely be following up with everybody's contact info just to make sure everybody has that in case they want to reach out. Since everybody kind of has different resources on their property, so may be interested in different programs with the varying agencies. now that everybody's kind of given an introduction to their agency and some of their programs, we wanted to sort of open the floor for our participants now. If you have questions for any of our partners, if you want to post something in the chat, once we sort of see you in the queue there, we'll call on you and you're welcome to sort of come off mute and pose your question in person, quote unquote.
And just in case folks are kind of pondering on questions that they might have for our panelists, we do have some questions to get conversation going. So if you've got a question, awesome. If not, no pressure.
Hey, Jared, do you want to talk about the Safe Harbor Act or that program?
Yeah, I can talk about safe harbor agreements. Sometimes if landowners have an endangered species on their land or want to do something that might be good for an endangered species that one might show up, landowners can enter into what is called a safe harbor agreement, where basically it gives them some regulatory assurances that just because you do something that's really good for an endangered species, it shows up, that you're not regulated forevermore down the road, so you don't get punished for it basically sometime down the road. So for a 10-year period, you could do something really good for endangered wildlife, and then if at the end of that 10 years you want to be done and do something else with your land, you can do that. That is for critters. Endangered plants don't count on private lands, so you can do whatever you want to the plants, and you're not breaking any rules with the Endangered Species Act. Most of the time, people don't have endangered plants or endangered butterflies anyway. There's very few in Linn County. So it's generally not an issue. We find that a little bit more out in Benton County, in the Philomath and Wren area, where we have Fender's blue butterfly. But that is an option for landowners.
Great, thanks for that. I popped a link there in the chat. There was a question from Jackie where she could find out more information about the Safe Harbor program. So Jackie, check out that link if you want more information on that. Just a question posed to the panel, and anyone can jump in on this just to kind of stir the pot. What are some of the common challenges that you see landowners encountering during some of these conservation or restoration projects?
I can jump in if no one else is going to. I oftentimes work with landowners who there are either times when you start working on a property and people don't realize what species might be there, or have a different goal in mind than what's ecologically possible at a property. And I think it's important to kind of understand the limitations of both what is possible with restoration, what's going to come in and utilize a property if you restore it to a certain condition, and what might be unobtainable, and similar to that, what is outside, what might be on already. Just my 2 cents.
Great, thanks for that, Brian. Yeah, there is sort of that idea out there that if you build it, they will come, and you know, that's not always necessarily the case.
I think sometimes just a matter of figuring out where to start, and what agencies and programs might make the most sense for you, where you might think the aquatic resources on your land is what agencies might really want to come and help with. They might turn right around and be looking at the oak woodlands up the hill behind them or something like that. So I guess I'd maybe try to have an open mind about some of the possibilities that your land might have, and listen to maybe all kinds of people. If there's an option to have other agencies come out, if the folks you're talking to aren't quite sure what to work on or help you with.
Jared, there is that specific question for you in the chat if you see it. Starla lives out in the Thomas Basin, and so she's asking, like, are you available to come out for site visits to identify wildlife potential pre-planning?
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
So Starla, we're happy to connect you with Jared so you guys can link up and have him come out and see what you've got going on there.
Yeah, looking forward to meeting you. I see there's something here about Oak Basin Tree Farm. Yes, Jim Mersnick does have Fender's Blues. Actually, I found them in 2005. So that was very fun. We work with him to this day. He's also been working with NRCS to this day too. So he's a great advocate for conservation and a colorful character that we get to deal with. So he's a great person.
Awesome. I've got another question in the chat, and this seems like one anybody could jump in on. Are there any efforts to create wildlife corridors for endangered species, connecting sort of different landowners' private property?
I guess I'll take a shot at it, and at the risk of talking over Brian, who probably has more corridors that he deals with than I do. But typically for us, having oak savanna and oak woodlands and open meadows is pretty important. For instance, we'll go back to Jim Mersnick's place. The Fender's blue butterflies were getting isolated in their meadows. They don't like to fly under trees. And his property abuts some meadows on BLM land where the same thing was occurring. So we actually cut down a lot of trees to try to open meadows up, tease the edges back, and connect them up. So that's one type of corridor that might be a little bit different than the type of corridor that Brian is working in.
And of course, in riverine and stream habitats, we think about connectivity, you know, in all of those. And we oftentimes will, in assessing a property or assessing a project, look upstream and downstream at potential barriers and what might be potential barriers for different life stages at different flow levels. So what might be a barrier for a juvenile Chinook is not going to be a barrier for an adult. And so we are assessing those kind of things, and then some outreach may occur to landowners, or if there's opportunities to work with people to eliminate barriers, perched culverts, for instance, and things like this. But, as far as a program that goes out to do this in an aquatic system, I'm not aware of one. So.
Great. I've got another question for Fish and Wildlife Service folks. Leland was asking, is it true that Lynn County doesn't allow all of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service programs?
As far as I know, Lynn County does. There's probably some things that the actual county might have some control over, but I haven't encountered any one of our programs running afoul of the county government. So I don't know if there's something more specific they have in mind.
Yeah, what did you have in mind, Leland?
When we first started setting up for Bogwood and working with Amy and her group at NRCS, we tried to apply for a couple of extra programs through the Forest Service, but also Fish and Wildlife. And we were told that Lynn County did not allow some of the programs that Fish and Wildlife had available. And this is 5 years ago, so things may have changed. And I don't remember the specific program. We were just told it wasn't available in Lynn. It was available in Benton, Polk, Marion, and all around, but not Lynn, because the county supervisors wouldn't allow that program to be enacted. Does it ring any bells?
Okay.
Anybody?
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. And that's more through Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And what was happening was that if a landowner wanted to change their land use from forest or farming to some sort of habitat program like open space, wildlife, or wetlands or something like that, that they could apply to Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife through the Wildlife Habitat Conservation and Management Program that would allow them to maintain their tax deferral, which it'd be a wildlife tax deferral type thing. I can't remember exactly what they call it, but it's basically the same tax bracket as timber deferral or farm deferral. Counties had to opt in on that. So in theory, Lynn County, if somebody was doing something like that, the idea is Lynn County could turn around and say, oh, you're not earning a living with your property, which isn't going to bring in any tax dollars. So we're going to change you to like rural residential tax rate or something like that. So that might be the one you're talking about, and that's Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Great. Yeah. Lee has acknowledged in the chat, ODFW. My bad. Mea culpa. You hit it. So great. We've got another question from Greg Schneider. He says, we have about 40 acres of mixed forest with a spring-fed creek and a 1 acre pond. We want to encourage diversity and would like advice on how to enhance our water features for wildlife. Where should I start?
Well, if you're talking about water features, I would try to get some kind of an assessment of the potential and the value of it from somebody. And Brian is much better at the aquatic systems than I am.
If the feature is connected to a stream or other, river or something like that, it would probably change how you would assess it. But if it is a spring which runs down to a pond, you'd probably look at the habitat types in between the pond and the spring, and then what is surrounding it. So how say an amphibian would access the pond and how it would access upland habitats, and what kind of other animals around there might need, say, short vegetation or brush for like predator cover during different parts of their life cycle, and how, especially like with amphibians or reptiles, they may want to access different corridors, basically, to access upland, prairie or woodland habitats to meet their, to meet their different needs and different life stages of their life. So that's what I would look at. But if you're connected to a stream, then that might change quite a bit. So you may be looking at enhancing the pond itself and, say, planting around it. Anytime you can get more complexity in the habitat structure around these things, be it, if the pond is currently open with no canopy structure, planting some trees over an area of it so that there is some area that has habitat, that kind of complexity, with some areas that are open that have higher productivity. You would probably I would lean towards something like that. So hopefully that helps.
Great. Yeah, and I was double checking. It looks like Greg's in the SIO area. So I don't know then, like Brian, if that is within your service area and that's potentially something you could come out and check in the field. So I can maybe be
Yes,
sure to
please.
make sure you guys get connected.
Pass that information along, absolutely.
Great. And then also, Jared, because that's been cleared up, the difference between U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and ODF&W, Lee says, come on out to Bogwood and we need to talk. So we'll make sure y'all get connected as well.
Sounds great. Any place named Bogwood sounds like a place I need to see. Looking forward to it.
I'd like to ask a question.
Please go for it.
Yeah. Brian, when you were giving your larger presentation and then we had the breakout, I kind of brought this topic up, and I'd like to bring it up again and see what more might be said, or if other people have ideas, which is that we irrigate from the Gaines Water Improvement District, which comes off of Crabtree Creek. So we're right in the Larwood area. And it's an old irrigation ditch. It was built in the late 1800s, and we are self-governing. And I'm really interested to explore the possibilities for what we in our irrigation district along this ditch, how we might work together, what we might do to improve the wildlife habitat, whether it's for fish or the riparian areas or whatever. And in my earlier question, you mentioned doing an assessment, and I kind of don't know where to start with that. Can you talk a little bit more about that, or anyone else talk about that general idea?
It's yeah, for me, I hear that, and I think I've dealt with various different types of irrigation districts previously. It's Allison, right?
Lisa.
Lisa, okay, sorry. I sent an email to someone in the Lacombe area. Are you in the Lacombe area?
Yes.
Okay, I sent an email, I believe I sent an email just earlier this evening when you had requested some information about some irrigation stuff, and you were probably in this presentation when I sent it. So you should have something in your inbox waiting for you. But I do have some not, I wouldn't say concerns necessarily, but you would want to check carefully with the irrigation district to make sure that we're meeting the criteria set forth by them. They're probably operating under certain parameters to get water down to other users, and to make sure that those needs are being met along with the needs of conservation. And every time I've run up against this, they're oftentimes operating under a different jurisdiction and a different, a different type of guidance than we may look at as far as a conservation community. And so it's important to make sure that those uses are being met. And then outside of that, how can we utilize this habitat for for the benefit of species. I work in a variety of habitats that have that are kind of dual use, that are like creeks that have been now used as irrigation ditches or to provide water. There's one off the Mackenzie River, for instance, that provides, it's an irrigation ditch that provides, they pump water into, and it's a creek that is turned into a throughway basically for water. And everything we do in that ditch, it's like we have to make sure that we're meeting the needs first of those users before we start making sure that we meet the needs of the fish. That includes things like streamside planting and things like this that might alter the channel. So it's kind of like, I think there's probably a lot of opportunity in the situation you bring up, but you almost want to make sure you have that, whatever documents they have to guide you first to see, like, well, what are my bumpers? If I was bowling, what are my bumpers here? What can I work to and against before you start project planning?
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was debating whether I was going to jump into this, and I think I will. So, Lisa, the Lacombe Irrigation District and kind of some of the smaller self-governing irrigation districts, that's something that I have a real interest in, and something that I think the council has an interest in being involved in. And I think that there are ways that the council can be involved to help navigate some of those kind of tricky situations that Brian's talking about balancing what's legally required, what the water rights are, what the user needs are, as well as the habitat for species. And this is the Lacombe district is something that I'm hearing about from a lot of folks. And so that tells me that there's some level of ripeness for this particular situation. So that's something that you and I can talk more about, and that I'm also engaged in conversations with other folks as well. So more to come.
And it appears that they have a water right for both irrigation use and a water right for power use.
Yes.
And we've dealt with that one on the Albany Lebanon Canal a couple times, and I know that it comes with certain restrictions, or the uses need to be X, Y, and Z because they put money into X, Y, and Z. So I would just make sure before you roll through a plan to make sure you have that stuff in hand. But anyway,
We're the Lacombe district is above. They draw water off of. We both draw water off of Crabtree Creek. They draw above us. So the Gaines Water Improvement District is downstream from Crabtree Creek. We're separate from them. But I get your points. I'm definitely taking your points, Brian, and I definitely look forward to talking with you, Shannon.
I'm just gonna throw in another one of our pre-cut question here, and it's sort of like, what are some larger issues, maybe on a regional scale, maybe sort of climate related or what have you, that you think might be useful for folks considering conservation projects moving forward, and the multi-year life of these projects?
I'll jump in. As far as climate change, what we've been seeing in the previous years is the wildfire. And I've seen OSU Extension, OSU paperwork, showing the future of natural disasters, and wildfires are not going to go away. So you want to make sure, if you live out there in rural areas and you have a woodland around your house, you want to make sure that you have that defensible space. You want to make sure that your house and your family's safe. And so there's lots of programs. We offer a program that will help, with brush management and pruning trees, that type of thing. And also ODF can come out and help you, determine what needs to be done as well. So that's just my input for climate change.
So I'd add, when it comes to forest health, what we typically do for oak habitat is the same thing as what you would do for fire resiliency. Generally, oak woodlands and oak savannas are early to mid-cereal stage habitat, which means they adapted to and require some sort of disturbance regime. Historically, that was fire. And usually what we're going for is bigger trees with wider canopies and thick trunks and spreading limbs. So forest thinning and actually getting rid of the underbrush for a herbaceous understory. Those are the type of things we're going for with oak restoration. And in the absence of fire, things get really thick, lots of ladder fuels. And if a fire ever did get going in them, it gets hot, climbs quickly, and kills ancient oak trees. So basically oak habitat restoration and conservation goes hand in hand with fire resiliency. So just wanted you to, you probably already know that, but just wanted you to be aware of that. In absence of burning, a lot of times the best disturbance regime might be grazing, or sometimes maybe it's just, a mowing regime or something like that. It takes a lot of work depending on the type of ground you're working on.
If I could just ask a quick follow-up related to that, Jared. I know you mentioned that you are a fire practitioner, and it is a really important management tool, albeit challenging generally on sort of the private land side of things. But from what I understand, there are some pathways for folks, highly dependent on locale and adjacent resources and things where prescribed fire can happen. Can you just talk a little bit about how folks who might just be interested in that management practice would go about connecting with folks and just having that discussion?
Yeah, probably talk to me or talk to ODF. The prescribed fire nut is a hard one to crack right now. There seems to be more and more interest in doing that, and it continues to get more and more difficult to do. Just the amount of people it takes to get it done, there's not lots of folks doing that in the Willamette Valley. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service might actually be the only one, unless we start talking about contracting. There's a few burns that ODF does, and sometimes some municipal fire department burns in closer around cities, but it's just not easy right now to even get enough resources to do it. I would love to do 20 burns a year, but we're only getting a couple done. And the last 2 years we've struck out, and that's just because of weather. Year before last, we got a bunch of rain in September. By the time things dried out enough at the end of September to burn, things had greened up so much that we weren't going to get the consumption we wanted. And then this last year, we did get some decent weather after the fires quit, but we didn't have resources to get the work done. Everybody that we burned with was still up, trying to extinguish the big fires and keep those from spreading. And just getting them put out. So we just didn't have enough people to get them done. So that's 2 years in a row. Now we have a backlog. There's some policy and liability issues we're dealing with. Happy to talk about it and, with folks and look around at property and talk about, whether that's an option, whether, it might be something to look into. But as far as getting it done, it could be out a ways, if at all. So sorry to be a wet blanket on that one, but I'd love to burn a lot more.
No,
I can add
thanks.
a little bit to that.
Yeah, please, Jen.
So I don't deal with fire on a day-to-day basis anymore, but this comes up every time we have a meeting with landowners or whoever, and it's a multi-jurisdictional approach depending on where you're at. If you're within a rural fire department district or you're within an Oregon Department of Forestry fire protection district, I suspect many of you are, and probably some of you aren't, or even near it. There's permitting. Obviously the weather issues, landowner, neighbor issues. It can be done, but it's a real hard battle. There's a lot of prep work that goes into some of this burning. Actual physical on the ground prep work, because when the absence of fire for so many years, there's so much more fuel we need to do it safely and effectively. You need the right weather and the right conditions, and sometimes it's pruning, putting in some lines ahead of a burn. Sometimes it's even spraying to get the vegetation dead that you're targeting. I've done that, but in my 10 plus years with ODF in the fire program, I have seen or been part of only a handful of burns. The only other person that's doing burning in the Willamette Valley that I'm aware of on a regular basis is the Army, the Corps of Oregon Military Department has some properties in the valley that they burn on occasion. I've been part of that. I know it's a great benefit, and our fire crew would love to assist everyone burning all the time. Have drip torch will travel, but unfortunately that it just doesn't work out. Right now as we speak, the current legislative session, there's multiple bills that address this and trying to alleviate some of the hurdles, especially with dealing with crossing property lines and some of the red tape and things. So more to come on that. Obviously that's going to be a long process, but people are realizing this, and it's not just burning up in the woods anymore that people are realizing there's a need and a desire. It's other places, other times. But unfortunately in Oregon, like you said, we have a really short weather window, either early spring sometimes, depending on what your objective is, or kind of in the fall. And if fall availability of resources is really tough, really short windows, not enough people to do it. So hopefully that'll increase in the future, but who knows?
Yeah, so we burn on the refuges a fair bit, as well as private lands. ODF is usually around, but ODF's on call for suppression over a lot of land. So in our fire plans, we can't count them as contingency, or we have to be able to count on something in order to count it as the contingency we need under the burn plan. And it's great to have them there, but technically they could get pulled out at a moment's notice. So yeah, having those resources there is important, and it is a maintenance activity. Just running a fire through your property to burn out underbrush, if it's a day that underbrush will catch fire, I'm taking that day off and going somewhere else, because you would not want to be burning on a day like that. The other thing I guess I'd say is that the weather window is really tight. That's our biggest limiting factor. We want to wait till it's usually mid-September until it gets too wet, which is usually mid-October. And we want it to get cool and have the humidity go up at night. If we're not getting cooler temperatures and higher humidity at night, it gets a lot more dangerous if it can reignite at night. So I mean, we're only talking 1 month, and the only way we could we're burning every burn day we can get, and we still don't have anywhere near enough resources. We would actually have to get 2 fire crews together if we were going to do more of that.
Great, thanks to you both for speaking to that complicated issue. I'll just do a quick plug because I know some folks who are part of this new program from OSU Extension. They now have a fire specialist program, and so they have representatives sprinkled throughout the state with pretty large service areas. And sort of as they form their mission, they're going to be coming out with educational seminars, as well as working with the partners in the community throughout the state on issues related to fire and general public awareness of those issues. So if you're not receiving the Compass and Needle put out by OSU Extension, check that out and look for some of these events coming up. I'm gonna just hold a little bit of space here in case any of our participants have any lingering questions. In the meantime, while you're thinking of that, we got a fun one for our panelists. Can we have you all state your favorite species? It could be plant, animal, fungi, whatever it is. What's your favorite species? And if you don't have a straight answer, I totally understand. I'm terrible at favorites.
Mine's the little Oregon chub. I have to go with Oregon chub.
And when you say what your favorite species is, you have to say why.
Oregon chub because it's like this little underdog. It's like a little minnow. It's our Willamette Valley's only endemic fish species, so it's kind of like our hometown fish.
I'm big into birds, so the logger-headed shrike, and I like it because it can impale its prey onto thorns. It's kind of gross, but interesting.
I'll take, since we have birds and fish covered, I'll take a plant. I'll go with Clarkia amina. Farewell to Spring is what it's called. And I like it because it's a late bloomer like me.
I'll go with the black bear. I run into them occasionally out doing what I'm doing, and I would just always think that that's a pretty neat critter to watch, either close or far. They're pretty fascinating. What they do, they're everywhere, but don't see them very often. And I don't know, I just think that's kind of a neat critter.
Awesome. This also just underscores sort of the beauty of being in the natural resource profession, where we get a chance to encounter some of these species over the course of our work and have those encounters, sometimes personal, that really help solidify our relationship to nature. So we feel really fortunate to be working in those spaces. And that's a great plug again to tap on all of us. We're here to come out to your open spaces and would love to chat with you. I'm going to just allow our panelists, if they have any last sort of words of wisdom or anything they want to say in closing to our participants before we wrap up. I'll give you a chance now.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always great to meet landowners who love their land so much. So it inspires me.
Hey, Mike, it's Sharon. How many participants did you have this go around versus last year?
Yeah, we had a pretty similar amount, I'd say hovering around 20 or so. This time, because we did this remote format, we blasted it to a pretty wide geographic area, and we were not trying to discriminate at all. So we have probably a broader geographic area represented this time around, which is also really cool.
Good deal.
I like that Erin put in the chat what her favorite species were too. So participants, please feel free to chime in the chat with your favorite species.
Then yeah, just to tag on to what Jared said, you know, the flip side of working in the natural resources field is that there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. There's a lot of sort of bad news about what's happening to nature globally. So it is really rewarding for us being in this field to interact with other folks who are so connected and passionate to their land and are willing to put in the time and the sweat equity and whatever they feel they can commit to improving these areas. And in the end, we all benefit from those efforts. So that's a really rewarding part of the work that we do. Okay, I'm seeing more great favorite species out there: shooting star, kingfisher, Swainson's thrush for the bird heads out there, valley pine. Love it. I'll have to represent the fungal world there. And although it's not my favorite species to eat, the lobster mushroom is pretty cool because it's actually a parasitic fungi that grows on the surface of another pretty common, unexciting species. In the words of the author of the book on mycology, before it's colonized, it's better kicked than picked. And after it's colonized by this parasitic species, it's all of a sudden an incredible culinary delight. So pretty cool ecology going on out there in the soil. All right, I'm not seeing a whole lot more questions out there. So I'm going to say thank you to all the participants for joining us for these past 4 weeks. Thanks so much to our amazing panel and to our speakers tonight and previous nights. And we look forward to continuing this dialogue with you guys and hope these plans really do become a living document for you to work off. And just know we're all here for you and ready to help you in whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.